Hey everyone, hopefully that's not a bad shot. I'm going to be quieter today because the baby is sleeping next to me. Okay, the topics for today are pretty big. I'm not going to talk a whole lot myself. I'm just basically going to kind of explain what I did with the articles and such that I found. Those will be down in the description. So you guys probably want to go there. There's going to be a lot of them, probably about 25 different articles and a couple of videos and one statistic page. And anyway, normally you don't see all of these things together, but recently somebody had an issue where all of these things were together, so I decided to put them all here with information. Some of them there's more information, some of them there's less, because there is simply more information out there for a couple of the topics. Number one, spanking. Spanking, period. We don't choose to spank, not now that the children are older, but I will say that I don't judge people as a whole for spanking. I have known families that do what they call spanking. That's not spanking, it's beating. And I've known families who use spanking, such as my father, and it's not necessarily a negative experience. I'll explain that in just a minute. So don't crucify me right now. I used spanking a small amount, probably more than I should have, and definitely enough to affect my daughter. When my daughter was little, by the time she was 3, I had stopped doing that at least all of the time. I was trying to, so please have mercy on me because I am new to no spanking. That being said, I grew up with it, but it was rare. My father had rules. He believed in only 3 swats. That didn't have anything to do with age, it was just 3, period. He believed in never spanking angry, and I don't remember him ever spanking me when he was angry. He had specific rules about the amount of pressure applied, so he never used a spoon or anything because he believed that that would leave marks, cause more damage than intended, and you can't feel it. You know, if you use your hand, you can feel the stinging of your hand. So he used his hand. I only remember being spanked a few times. I must have been about 6. I'm going to tell you about one instance so it's easier to understand. We never had much money. We were pretty poor when I was little. And I was attending swim classes, swim lessons. And I was very good, but the swim instructor noticed that I didn't have any goggles. And the other students had goggles, and somebody said something to me. So we were out shopping one day, and I found goggles, and I wanted them. So my father told me we didn't have money for the goggles. And I don't know what gave me the idea, but I was 6. So I went around asking everybody in the store if they had money to buy me these goggles. Now, begging is one of those things that my father thought warranted a spanking. That's very pretty, honey. I wish you had listened to the hand, though. The baby's asleep next to me, so I don't want her coming in here. Normally she's very loud. Anyway, so he didn't spank me there. He wasn't angry. He just thought that the spanking was necessary to teach me that begging would not happen again. Now, the spanking didn't actually do that. It was the fact that I realized by the expression on my father's face how very humiliating that was for him. It was awful for me. And then, of course, I had to wait the whole ride home and wait in my room until he was ready to come administer the spanking. I think I only got 2 swats for that. It wasn't a big deal. It barely hurt. I have a very high pain tolerance, so it wasn't a big deal. What was a major deal for me was how very much I had embarrassed my father, and I didn't realize it till that very minute. So the spankings for me, and the fact that my father had specific rules about it, was not a big deal. I don't have any damage from that. On the other hand, my mother used a technique that a lot of people in that generation used, is manipulation and intimidation and coercion. I mean, there's a lot of words for it, but it's a parenting technique that a lot of people in that generation used. And when she found out as a very small child that I was motivated by pleasing, and I wanted very badly to please, it was very easy to get me to do what I was supposed to, or get me to do what was wanted by a little pressure here, a little pressure there. Just verbal nudges, not any kind of physical punishment. You turning them all into ponchos. That one's nice. You need to stay away from the bed. Yeah. Go back in the playroom, please. Try really hard not to get them all over the floor. Okay. So, spanking is probably the thing I have the most to say about. So bear with me here, excuse me. My mother remarried when I was 12, and her husband tended to have a much different approach to things. He was angry a lot, very, very angry, slamming things, punching holes in walls, that kind of angry. And his spankings weren't spankings. They were much more damaging. And my brother was the recipient of most of that, the youngest one. I found out later as an adult that that's actually kind of a tactic to control the older children, is to pick on the younger one. But anyway, I do understand the major difference between the two different ways that I was punished as a child. So, to me, one is night and day from the other. A lot of people say spanking is spanking, and even a pat on the butt, sending him out of a room, is not okay. Nothing's okay as long as it's a physical contact with a body part. And I don't think that that's true. I think as long as it's not violently intended, that kind of thing is fine, as long as the child has no problem with it. Legally, everybody knows what the laws are, or you should know what the laws are. If you don't, please look that up and find out what your laws are. But they're pretty gray areaed, pretty translatable, to whatever you want. The second issue is spanking babies. Now, I actually had dinner with my father yesterday, so I asked him about that one. I said, what was the youngest you ever spanked any of us? Because my father has 4 children. And he said, not until over the age of 3. So they considered babies to be under the age of 3. My father considered us to be basically babies until out of the toddlerhood. Now, babyhood technically ends at 12 months, and they enter toddlerhood until they're 3, and then that ends over the age of 3. A lot of people don't really think of that as being the end of babyhood or the end of toddlerhood. But when we're talking about spanking babies, most of the statistics that I've read, in fact all of them that I've read, are talking about children under the age of 12 months. And I guess 1/3 of babies are spanked. Now what that means, who knows, because that is so open to translation. Does that mean that you're, turning baby over and actually giving them a spanking through their diaper, walloping through their diaper? Does that mean that you're switching their thigh, which was what was done when I was a teen with a lot of the families that I knew. They used the handle to a wooden spoon and they'd whack, 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 until the baby was screaming bloody murder. Anyway, across the board, if you read about spanking babies, psychologists, child psychologists, anybody talking about the ramifications of spanking say that spanking a baby or a child under the age of 3, even toddlers, is much more damaging than a child who is spanked over the age of 3 once they have cause and effect and comprehension of what is going on. When they're very little, a lot of people say, okay, that spanking is not necessarily a spanking, it's not really punishment, it's aversion therapy, meaning that if they touch something, that they would associate that thing that they touched that was wrong with the pain. But that's not usually what happens. You'd have to read about that a little bit more yourself to find out the psychology of the baby's brain. Which, please do, because I don't know for sure if any of the articles concentrated just on the development of an infant's brain and the toddler brain. But they are not suited to being spanked or punishment as a means of asserting your will over the child's will. It just doesn't do what you would think it's going to do. You might end up with a complacent child, one that isn't going to touch and isn't going to get into things and so on. They might understand the meaning of the word no, but then you're going to have internalized other issues. It's okay, sweetie. It's alright. At least to my knowledge. The third issue, grandparents or aunts and uncles, other family members spanking or punishing your children. Now, to my mind, there is a difference between punishment and discipline. As far as I know, most attachment parents, conscious parents, gentle parents, whatever you want to call us, New Age parents, most of us don't believe in punishment. That includes things like, timeouts and, holding a quarter against a wall or a piece of paper against a wall, or taking toys away or sending children to their room to think about what they've done. Punishment is different than discipline. So, and also you want to ascertain, you want to see this little guy? She wants my paper, which isn't good. You want to ascertain whether or not that family member is a co-parent. A co-parent is somebody who is involved in the parenting and the raising of your child, whose opinions, ideas, and daily living is going to affect your child in a large scale, almost as much or equal to the amount that you and your significant other are going to impact the raising of this child. So, you need to ascertain how much this person is going to be in your child's life. If they are a co-parent, if you consider them a co-parent, then having a co-parenting discussion with them is very important. You need to tell them what it is you want to raise your child like, find out if their ideas and such are in line with yours. If they're not in line with yours, then they need to understand and make concession that you are their parent. You are the main co-parent, the main parent, excuse me, and they are the co-parent, and that certain things are going to be done the way that you want to raise your child. And if they can't concede, a lot of grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, the main thing is I think moving things out of their house. A lot of grandparents or aunts and uncles don't want to do that. They don't want to box up all their stuff and wait until the child is a teenager to get it back out, which is understandable. My father actually did that. He has everything put away until all of my children are over a certain age. I love that you know, from him, because he does respect me in that regard, and isn't going to try and get any of that stuff down until they're over a certain age. Of course, he's hoping I don't have another one, because he's already counting the years till he's free. But, anyway, if your parent or your aunt or whoever this is in this situation here with you, a cousin, that you're wanting to co-parent with, if they will not accommodate the way you want to raise your child, and they say, you know, it's my house, my rules, the baby or child is just going to have to adapt to that when they come visit, and then, you know, so on and so forth. Then it's your decision as a parent to see if that is a bad thing developmentally for your child. Normally, you know, children over a certain age, they will adapt. They will say, okay, there's this rule for this, and there's this rules for this, you know, rules for kindergarten and rules for home, and so on and so forth, and they can separate that. When babies are little, it's very hard to separate out that there's rules for grandpas that are different than rules that are at home. You know, they expect to be able to just do the same things at other people's houses that they do at yours. And if people won't help out with that, then the only choice you really have is to go ahead and take your baby out of that situation until it's safer, until they're bigger. Spanking and big ticket issues like that, if you've decided that you're going to discipline one way and they disagree and want to implement their own sort of discipline, then you just have to decide if you're going to deal with that, because it's more than likely that they're not going to budge. So then you would have to remove the child from the dangerous place until, you know, other arrangements can be made, or maybe a talk again about what kind of things you will give and take on. Okay, all of that over with, and on to the biggest one, in my opinion, is gender profiling for discipline. Saying that a boy, simply because he's a boy, not because of his character or because of his personality, but simply because he's a boy, has to be disciplined harsher and differently than a girl in order to develop the whole be a man idea. Now, what exactly, please excuse me, does that mean to most people? Most people think of this whole be a man idea as the suppression of emotion and outward displays of emotion and of your feelings. Do you want some milk? Yeah? Okay. So, there we go. Of course, I don't believe in, someday I will tell the story of my son. I only have one son and 3 daughters, so I've never treated him any differently than the girls, other than to base it on his personality and his character. Now, I've heard this a lot from other families. My family doesn't really do this whole kind of be a man thing, which I'm so relieved by. But other families do, and I've heard it from other families, and I've seen it in other families, and it is basically utter BS. In my opinion, and from what I've seen from other people. Teaching boys to suppress their emotion can be a very volatile situation. You end up with a more violent boy. Now, that's not 100% of the time, that's for sure, but it does happen. and I've got an article, it's actually part of a book, I believe, that's on this, and then there's a few other things talking about it. I'll go ahead and put it, like I said, in the description. But one of them is that video that's been out for a while talking about how we do, you know, tell men to man up. And I think it was pretty public and pretty widely circulated. But just about everybody agrees that that's kind of an old-fashioned notion, and we have long since proved that that's not a good idea to discipline boys more harshly, or even exclusion from activity because it's not a boy activity. And right now we're trying to include girls so much, and I think boys have kind of been pushed to the wayside a little bit. You know, we're not thinking as much about them, because my son right now is going through this whole stage where he wants to be a princess, and all of that is because he wants to be beautiful. He's kind of slowly coming out of it, but anyway, there's not a whole lot out there for princes and being beautiful. And the little bit that there is, I've let him watch and so on, but there's just tons. It's totally inundated with these beautiful little princesses. And the girls, of course, they're watching them all the time, so he sees this a lot. And I'm pretty sure that he'll grow out of wanting to be, you know, the beautiful little princess just like his sisters are. But for right now, allowing him to do that, I think is important, because so many times, you know, you hear it said that, you know, you can't wear that, you can't do that, because it might instill the idea that they are feminine. But, I mean, goodness gracious, they're 3. or 6 or 10. I mean, they will usually outgrow that. And most boys that play dress up and want to pretend girls and so on grow into just fine masculine men. So I've known a lot of them personally. Not that they'd ever want to admit that. I think that that's it. Hopefully this hasn't like touched any buttons with anybody, and they're not going to come trying to pin me to a stake. All the information that I found on the separate subjects will be in the description. I will try to organize them according to the topics that I listed: spanking, spanking babies, and grandparents or, you know, family members disciplining a child, and then the whole idea of, you know, be a man. I'll try to put them in that order, and hopefully I get everything right and everything links okay and so on and so forth. Oh, a couple of the articles for other people's disciplining your child, they don't necessarily list family members in that. I think one of them is caregiver, like a babysitter, and the other one was a daycare worker. So you just have to take it in context of what you need it to reference to, and just, you know, take away from that what you can. There wasn't actually a whole lot on it, and one of them is just a statistics graph. You can read all the comments if you want, but a lot of those are for spanking and saying that, you know, spanking never really hurt them and so on. So, you know, do read them if you want, or don't read them if you don't want, whatever your opinion is on that matter. But the stats is basically just out of all the people that were interviewed, it was like 200 something, and most of them said that they didn't want family members or babysitters or whatever disciplining their child. They thought that that was their job. So I'm going to go ahead and provide that, and we'll see what happens. I think this video ended up being really long, even though I tried to keep... Oh my gosh, excuse me. It's the second video I've done that in. Mommy's rude. Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody. So, you guys have a good day. I am going to go and wash some dishes. I'm always washing dishes. And hopefully that provided some information if any of you have an issue with any of these things. And have a good day. Bye.